Alex, it's really nice to see you. Thanks so much for spending some time. It's an incredibly busy time for you from a deal-making perspective. We're going to get into all of that in a few minutes, but I want to start sort of at the beginning if we can, because this business that you are building is much more than, a former athlete's kind of side hustles. This is the hustle in many ways. This is a massive growing series of businesses. But take me back to the inspiration for it and why you take this so seriously in terms of really building this series of businesses.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. For me, I think it starts with my mom, just watching her every single day, having two jobs. We come from very humble beginnings. My father left when I was 10, and we were left with my mom and my two siblings, my brother Joe and my sister Susie. And I've always had this entrepreneur spirit of the two Bs. I wanted to have baseball and be a CEO in business. And that started when I was about 10 years old. I saw my mom work two jobs. I saw her really struggle. I saw that the lack of financial literacy knowledge worked against us. So that's something that I'm really, really passionate about now. And I also remember my mom coming home on Thursdays and Friday nights with her tip money from serving tables at night. And as a 10-year-old boy, I would have to lift the mattress to help her. And she would take that envelope and just throw it under there. And the reason why, Jason, was because we didn't trust banks, as she told me. She trusted her mattress. And that was the mentality that I grew up with. So that gave me the inspiration that I didn't want to be renting apartments for the rest of my life. We kept moving every 18 months because the landlord kept raising the rents. What I kind of dreamed as a kid and hoped for and prayed for was that one day I can trade places with a landlord. And sure enough, about 12 or 13 years later, I had my first opportunity to buy a duplex for about $250,000 with a $48,000 down payment. And I did that, and off I went with my business career.
Wow. And so that I want to stay with that for a second, if we could, because real estate really, it feels like, and the whole concept of ownership, even more broadly, I mean, that does sit at the center of all this, right?
Yeah, and as one of my great mentors, Mr. Warren Buffett, he always taught me, stay in your circle of competence. And just by default, Jason, just by being a lifetime renter with my mom, I understood that every month, rain or shine, we had to pay our rent. And that created a consistency and a framework that I thought, boy, if I can start buying real estate when I'm really young, get some moderate debt, as I pay down my debt is a perfect hedge to my professional career, because as I make W-2 income in my 20s, I can buy assets that generate some cash flow. And as my career winds down, my real estate appreciates, my cash flow appreciates and increases. And I thought that was a great hedge, simply not to go bankrupt like you read about a lot of athletes and entertainers post their careers.
So let's talk about that transition, because it's a fascinating one for you. And as I alluded to earlier, there is a very successful model out there that basically says you play ball, you do well, you build a portfolio that is largely based on endorsements more than anything. But, one of the people that I believe you consulted early on was Magic Johnson. He obviously has set a different sort of standard. Tell me about that and what you took from your friendship and interaction with him.
Yeah, first of all, Magic is a friend and a mentor and one of my heroes. Magic is, he's been such an inspiration for me. Jace, we went to a dinner because I asked him for some help and guidance. And this was when I was almost 20 years ago when I signed with the Texas Rangers. And I asked Magic for some advice. He took me to a steak dinner in LA. I thought it was going to be like 30 minutes. It was like 3.5 hours. And he basically laid out the entire playbook. And I could not believe how generous and humble he was, how his advice and experiences, both the good and the bad, has been a pivotal part of how I build out Corp. And to this day, we talk about that. But the point is, I think if you're a mentee, there's plenty of great mentors out there that are willing to share experiences, and it's priceless and invaluable of how much value it can bring to folks like me. And now I'm doing it for dozens of athletes and entertainers who call for advice, and is my opportunity to pay it forward to what Magic and others did for me.
All right, so take me inside the portfolio. Help me understand, some of the more representative investments inside A-Rod Corp, because anybody who spends some time on the website, you see it is wide ranging, and yet there are some clear themes. You are going deep on a couple different themes. Tell me about one or two of those.
Yeah, I think, A-Rod Corp does two main things. One is we have a legacy real estate business that goes back about 20 years. And then we do venture and private equity deals, and we're taking minority and sometimes majority positions in companies. And we own over 30 companies in our portfolio. We're taking about 7 or 8 public here this year. So it's been an extraordinary year for ARC. But think about a company like Hims and Hers that we came in a few years ago. It just went public earlier this year, and it's been a great success. Telemedicine for the masses at an affordable price. We like the space. It has a huge TAM. And when you think about a business that throws off 92% reoccurring income with 76% margins, we think this in the early stages of what could be a really great company. That's one. And then you take one that I did with Mark Laurie called Archer, Flying Cars. We came in around $125 million valuation, and we took it public at $3.6 billion. And Mark did this all within 2 years. So it's wide ranging, but it's really a place where we can bring value and really bring in the capital and the people.
All right, so you brought up Mark's name. Let's talk about some of your partners and sort of how you make this approach, because one of the things that's clear is you're picking partners in different regards and for different reasons. Let's talk a little bit about Mark, because he comes into play for a venture capital firm that you're starting, but also more notably, and right now, comes into play as a fellow potential owner in an NBA team. I know that is still ongoing, but reports are that the Timberwolves, you have an agreement to buy it. We'll leave the details to be worked out, but tell me why you want to own a team.
Well, I think, look, we learned a lot through the Mets process. We worked really hard on that. Like I tell my friends, we were the second winners. It was an incredible process that we learned a great deal. What we learned is that these are more than just sports teams. They're media entertainment platforms that is their intersection between e-commerce, technology, media, sports, and entertainment. And when you look at the NBA and you look at the tailwinds, you look at the leadership, you look at the global footprint and where it's going, the young demographics, the eyeballs, they get entertainment as well as any league in the world. And Mark and I are close friends, we're partners, and we think that our set of skills combined can be a great added value to a sports franchise. So we're very excited about the opportunity.
So tell me about that. Tell me about that relationship and how something like that develops in terms of figuring out how the skills mesh together. I mean, clearly, going through the Mets process, as you say, taught you about what you guys could both bring to the table, but you're also starting a venture capital firm with Mark. So how does it work?
Yeah, look, Jason, a lot of what I do in business, I frame it back to my Yankee days, right? And I think complementary set of skills work really well. You can't have 10 shortstops, right? You can't have 10 pitchers. So the idea is, Derek Jeter and myself are great complements to Mariano Rivera and Andy Pettitte. And you put the four of us together, that makes a championship, combination. When you look at Mark Laurie and I, we're great partners because we have complementary set of skills. He's world-class when it comes to e-commerce, technology, computer. I barely know how to turn on a computer, so we make a dream team. I bring my 25 years experience of professional baseball, business, but we really complement each other. Number one, we're great friends. Number two, there's infinite trust there. And those are the two things, foundation, that you need in a partnership in business that can last for years and years.
So tell me about this venture capital firm, because the whole notion of it, Vision Capital People, VCP, what's the business model there that maybe differentiates it or distinguishes it from some of the other pools of capital?
Yeah, great question, Jason. I think for us is VCP stands for Vision Capital People. The first time I understood what that VCP meant to me was when George Steinbrenner brought me to the Yankees in 2004. I sat down with him and he described VCP better than anyone. He said to me, Alex, we have the vision that we want to be the best franchise in sports around the world. And we have a clear vision of that. He says, we have tremendous resources on the capital side. We're going to deploy more capital than anybody else, and we're not going to take any shortcuts. And then we're going to go out and find the best people in the world. We're going to pay them the best, and that's going to keep us at the top forever. So when I sat down with Mark years later, that's exactly was his vision. And we went out and executed that. We've taken about 6 or 7 companies that we've acquired together or incubated. And then we thought about, why not just make this into a fund and bring our friends and families into this ride with us.
And so ultimately, is this is a pool that could take outside capital? Like, how does that part of the business grow?
Yeah, so the idea is to take a big stake in companies, anything from anywhere from 40% to 80%, where we're controlling the business. We're putting $10 million pre-seed. We did this with NowWith, for example, is a company that we're very excited about, social media and e-commerce. And we're launching here in June. We put in $10 million pre-A, and then we'll go out in the second round, maybe Series A, put another $50 million to work and really help determine the outcome of that business through the vision, through putting great capital to work, and then finding people to surround our founders with, where we can take a company that's good to great.
So when we think back across the last year or so, in addition to all becoming, amateur epidemiologists, we also became very familiar with the whole concept of a special purpose acquisition company, a SPAC. You're involved with one. It has gone public. Slam Corp, I believe it is called. Tell me about how that fits in. That is not the vehicle, we should be clear, through which you're pursuing buying sports teams. But what has been your experience with that, especially because everywhere you turn, including a recent cover of Businessweek, there are both like big questions about, but also increasingly still big opportunities in the SPAC world. Tell me about your experience there.
Yeah, we like where the space is right now, because I think what's happened is you've basically eliminated a lot of the amateur players that just want to participate in the space because it's hot. There's real institutional offices that you need. You need to do real due diligence, and there's a lot of good companies out there that are SPAC worthy, but it's really kind of leveled out the playing field a little bit. The reason why we love SPAC is, number one, I have a wonderful partner in Himanshu and Antar. Is a 50-50 partnership. They have an incredible track record. They've returned north of 40% in their hedge fund over the last 3 years, 58% last year. And why we came together is we feel that ARC is tailor-made for SPACs. I mean, we have more deal flow than we can, they're coming out of our ears. But the barrier to entry has often been the capital. And with the SPAC, we have the public money and we have the deal flow. And collectively with Antara, we have the back office to bring the best opportunities to these companies and then help them go from good to great by bringing in our expertise, our market share, and how to really tell the story. A lot like we've done with companies like Petros Pace, Hims and Hers, Saunders, companies in our portfolio that either have gone public or soon will be going public.
So what's your day-to-day like at this point? I mean, I look across the portfolio, I look at some of the things you're involved in. You have your hands in so many different things. How do you break it up? How do you divide your time? This has to be something of a time management challenge, if nothing else, Alex.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have great people around me. I mean, I have 3 really, really strong women that run our companies and our portfolio. I have Lisa, who runs our investment arm. We have Kelly, who's my chief business officer, and she runs everything that we touch. And then we have Aaron Knight and Stuart Zook, who run our real estate. And really, they run their own business. I don't micromanage. They tell me really what to do. They're way smarter than I am. But really, again, when you have the VCP, and I think we have that at A-Rod Corp, you're able to do a lot of great things. And I'm able to kind of roam around and bring value at the highest level with great relationships with like the Blackstones of the world or Barry Sternlit or Mark Laurie. And then I let my teammates do what they do best.
So, you mentioned some of those names, and it's interesting to talk about this kind of intersection, which you and I have talked about before, of kind of finance and sports. I would imagine, just being who you are, just speaking very plainly, that many doors are open to you, and yet you still have to walk through them, and you still have to sit down at that table, and then the conversation goes from there. What have you learned in that process of kind of getting from, hey, it's nice to meet you, sure, we can take a picture, to actually getting a deal done, actually doing business?
You know, that's a great question, because this is something that Magic Johnson and I joked around back 15, 20 years ago, which is, you know, as an athlete, as an entertainer, you pretty much have any door open to you. People will take a meeting, they'll want a picture, you sign an autograph, they have kids and grandkids, but usually nothing happens after that. What we learned is the doors were open. You have to be prepared to be open. You have to know your stuff. You have to have an A-plus team to be able to follow up and execute. Because when you walk in the door as an athlete or an entertainer, you have to understand that what the business person is thinking is they're not going to follow up, is going to be flaky. They don't have a capable team. They run a licensing model, not an ownership model. So you have two strikes walking in. You have to come in and really know your stuff, be well prepared, and have a world-class team to be able to execute in all these doors opening. If not, it's just an autograph show.
And so talk to me about that difference between licensing and ownership, because clearly that is a key theme that you have pulled through. It comes with more responsibility, more complexity, and so in general, that's just harder to do. It is relatively easy, and again, I'm just speaking plainly to you, when you are as famous as you are, people want to put your name on something, and that will help their sales. It's a whole different thing when they're bringing you on as an equity partner, as someone who has a say, but also has the responsibility to carry it forward. How do you adopt that mindset, or what are the tools you need to use in order to actually execute?
Licensing model compared to an ownership model are completely different. If you think about a licensing model, you get CAA or WME, whoever your agent are, they'll go out and do a deal with, you know, Nike or Mercedes-Benz, and it's a 3-year deal. You get paid a few $1,000,000 a year, and that's pretty much it. It's really simple. When you think about building businesses, it requires time, effort, resources, an incredible team, an institutional team to be able to build, because it's really hard to do, right? And it takes more time and energy and a different set of skill set, right? So it's not for everybody, but if you do it, you have to do it right. And the upside is much greater, but there's so much harder work to be able to execute that.
And so, you know, you mentioned this earlier, Alex, this notion that this generation coming up behind you is much more candidly sophisticated. They're much more, I would say, ambitious from an earlier age. I mean, you were an outlier in some ways, kind of the exception that proved the rule. The rule, it seems now, and this is based on conversations I've had with kids coming out of high school into the NBA or into Major League Baseball or into, you know, the NFL within a couple of years, they're thinking about these things much earlier. Why do you think that is, and what are the implications of that?
Well, when I grew up, for example, Jason, I wanted to be just like, you know, Cal Ripken or Magic Johnson and Larry Bird or Dan Marino, and that was it. Today, kids want to come up and they want to be more like Mark Cuban or Mark Laurie or LeBron James, who's both. I think there's a shift in thinking. There is a much larger ambition. There's more transparency out there. But I would say that there's a shift in power that's happened over the last 10 years. But more specifically, over the last 5 years, the power has shifted to the talent and the entertainer. And what that means is that you couldn't think 15, 20 years ago that an entertainer like Kim Kardashian can actually beat a KKR or a Blackstone on a particular deal. But the truth is, in today's world, she can. And that's really cool and is really fun. And it democratizes things a great deal. So with that, I think there's an adjustment being made right now of like, okay, institutions actually need the talent, but if you do it right, 1 + 1 should equal 11.
And so there is risk, though, in sort of taking that on, because just going back to what you said before, a licensing deal, pretty low risk. I mean, you're getting a check and, you know, then you sort of go off and do what you're going to do. And so how do you factor risk into all of this?
Listen, I would say that sometimes a licensing deal is exactly the right thing to do, right? I mean, if you have a wonderful company like a Nike or a Starbucks and you want to do a partnership with them, fantastic. I think it's just like playing a different sport. When you're building businesses, you need different team members, different commitment, different alignment. The way you structure pay is completely different. With the licensing deal, you need one agent, one manager. They do the deal. Everybody gets their money. Agent gets 10%. You get 90, and you're off to the next, right? And you fill out your obligations. With a business, you can build it for 10 or 12 years and not collect a dollar. And are you willing to do that? Are you willing to architect the team? Look, 99% will say, no, I don't need that. I just want to be on a boat and go enjoy my life and play golf. And there's nothing wrong with that. So you have crazy people like me and Magic and Greg Norman and others that really have wanted to be excellent both on the baseball field or the sports field as well as the boardroom.
So with 2 minutes left, I'm going to ask you a really big sort of sprawling question. But it does strike me as you're talking about this and we're talking about, your future as an owner. It feels like over the last year, our relationship with sports has changed and maybe deepened, our relationships with athletes, how athletes see themselves. Do you feel that in this moment? You mentioned LeBron. We think about the activism in the NBA and the WNBA that we saw in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing and Black Lives Matter and all of these different things. What's changed about our relationship with sports and teams?
Well, I think it's just gotten to be even a more important platform. I mean, there's so much pain around the world. So many people are suffering with these tough times, whether it's health or financially, or just really not knowing what the future holds. And I've always said that in times like this is about bringing people together. And nothing brings people together more than music and sports. And I think moving forward is even a bigger responsibility and a bigger platform to be able to not only run a great business, but to do a lot of good in those communities around these sports franchises.
All right, so only about a minute left. What haven't you done that you still want to do?
I've never skied. I want to try skiing. That's one thing I want to do. But, through my sports career and my contracts, I wasn't allowed to go skiing. So my daughters are trying to get me out on the skis, which will be a pretty funny sight, I bet.
I have to say, when I asked that question, if you had given me 100 guesses as to the thing you wanted to do, I would not have guessed skiing. Anything on your business agenda? Anything you want to do from a business perspective that you haven't done? Again, the portfolio is wide-ranging at this point.
No, Jason, my focus is to continue to help kids with brown skin like me that came from the bottom, with a single mother, who were the complete underdogs, who nobody believed in me, and I just love the ability to, what the Boys and Girls Club did for me, the great mentors that I've had, what they've done. I will continue to be involved very much with the Boys and Girls Club. We put about 40 kids through college. My goal is to put 400 or 1,000 kids through college at the University of Miami. And I'm indebted, and it's my debt that I have to go out and pay back and do good in the world.